Just before sunrise, off the coast near Veracruz, a gas carrier sits motionless at sea, surrounded by hundreds of other ships doing exactly the same thing. Every one of them is waiting for a chance to pass through the Panama Canal, moving between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. And some of them have been waiting a lot longer than they planned, weeks in some cases. As the Canal Authority sharply limits how many large ships can pass each day, the line barely moves. But on this particular morning, one ship isn't waiting at all. In fact, it's about to do something no one else here can. A Japanese fuel carrier called Sunny Bright quietly breaks formation and heads straight for the canal. No delay, no line, no uncertainty. Just like that, it's gone. Only 2 hours earlier, the company leasing the ship, Ineos Holdings, had paid an eye-watering 3.975 million US dollars for a single express transit slot, one of only 5 available that day. Yes, nearly $4 million for one shortcut. That payment alone let this otherwise ordinary vessel glide straight through, like skipping an entire airport security line with a golden ticket. It became the most expensive toll ever paid for any transport route in history, and somehow, that still wasn't the full bill. On top of the record bid, the ship still had to pay the normal canal fees, which in 2023 added another roughly $1.5 million for a vessel of this size. So pause for a second and think about that number. One ship, one crossing, over $5 million. While these staggering payments look like a short-term win for Panama, they revealed a much bigger issue beneath the surface. Global shipping always follows the easiest path. It always has, and it always will. Goods naturally move from where they're made to where they're needed in the cheapest, fastest, and safest way possible. Long delays, unpredictable queues, multi-million-dollar fees, and growing political uncertainty all work against that goal. And when that happens, shipping doesn't fight back, it just goes around. Ask most people why the Panama Canal matters, and they'll say it lets ships avoid sailing all the way around South America, dodging Cape Horn and the brutal waters of the Drake Passage. In simple terms, it's a shortcut. And for a long time, that was absolutely true. But today, that explanation isn't quite enough anymore. The idea of cutting a passage through the narrow strip of land between the continents dates back more than 500 years. When Vasco Núñez de Balboa crossed the isthmus in the early 1500s, he famously wrote that a canal could one day exist there. Even back then, the logic was obvious. It's one of the very few infrastructure projects in history that earned support from both a U.S. president and a Holy Roman Emperor. But by the time it was finally completed centuries later, the world it served had already changed. Originally imagined as a way to rush South American riches back to Europe, the canal instead became a lifeline between the east and west coasts of the United States. Railways were still limited, and the canal massively reduced travel time and danger between two growing economic centers. But fast forward to today, and the map looks completely different. Today, the biggest source of outbound cargo is China. Last year alone, China's net exports reached a record $1.2 trillion, and about 90% of that moved by sea. Meanwhile, the largest destination for incoming goods is the eastern United States. So naturally, ships want to move between these 2 points with as little friction as possible. At first glance, the Panama Canal looks like the obvious answer. But here's the part most people forget. The Earth is round. If ships head west instead, passing through the Malacca Strait, the Suez Canal, Europe, and then across the Atlantic, the total distance is only slightly longer than crossing the Pacific directly. Not by weeks, not even by much. And as Panama grows more expensive and unpredictable, this alternate route starts to look better every year. And the advantages don't stop there. This route pays you back as you sail it. It passes cheap fuel hubs like Singapore, major ports in India, and massive economic centers in Europe. Ships can load and unload cargo along the way, making it easier to keep vessels full. It also allows companies to use much larger ships. Despite recent expansions, the Panama Canal still has strict size limits. Even today, the largest ships that can pass through max out at about 14,000 containers. That sounds big, until you see what's sailing elsewhere. By avoiding the canal entirely, companies can deploy ultra-large ships carrying close to 24,000 containers, using nearly the same crew, and only slightly more fuel. That means more cargo, more markets, fewer tolls, and fewer surprise delays, all for about a 10% longer journey. When you look at modern trade this way, the question isn't really whether the Panama Canal is becoming less relevant. The answer for now comes down to a few practical forces working in its favor. One is that many ports on the U.S. East Coast still can't handle the newest generation of ultra-large container ships. So even if ships want to avoid Panama, they sometimes can't. Cargo often needs to be transferred mid-journey, which adds time, cost, and complexity, pushing some traffic back toward the canal. The second factor is its main competitor. The Suez Canal is wider, deeper, and able to handle the world's largest ships. It also processes more than twice as many daily transits. On paper, Suez wins, around 75 ships per day versus Panama's 35. When needed, Suez can push even higher. This extra capacity lowers costs dramatically. Getting the largest ship through Panama can cost around $1.4 million. Through Suez, about $600,000 for nearly double the cargo. But here's the catch. Geography isn't everything. Suez sits in one of the most unstable regions in the world. Piracy, regional conflicts, and political spillover have pushed some companies to avoid it entirely, even choosing to sail all the way around Africa. And suddenly, Panama looks safer again. Not better, just safer. That breathing room has helped the canal survive its own limitations. But it's not a comfortable position, because despite its reputation, the Panama Canal isn't especially modern. It was built for a world with fewer ships and smaller trade volumes. Since it opened over a century ago, global trade has grown nearly 1,000-fold. Freight through the canal has doubled since 1980, but global freight overall has grown nearly 6 times, which means Panama is falling behind, quietly. Ships are getting bigger, passages are getting fewer, and water has become the ultimate bottleneck. Most of the canal relies on Gatun Lake and a lock system that lifts ships nearly 28 meters above sea level. Each transit drains massive amounts of fresh water into the ocean, and that same water keeps the country running. Even with modern conservation systems, capacity depends on rainfall. The canal has hit its ceiling. Charging more has worked, for now, but shipping companies can see the limits, and they're already planning around them. The canal won't disappear, but it also can't stay what it once was. And while economists see this as a logistics problem, there's another layer entirely. The Panama Canal is also a strategic asset for the most powerful Navy on Earth, and that changes everything. If you want to understand why, the next video breaks down the other choke points that